Dulkagi wa di gagi. Your land is your blood. The mystery of ancient Punt. Listen, my child, come closer to the fire. The night is long, but ancient history runs even deeper. Before our clans had names, before modern borders were drawn, before the word Somali appeared in any history book, there existed an ancient civilization so wealthy that the pharaohs of Egypt dreamed of reaching it. The ancient Egyptians called it Punt, Ta Netja, the land of the gods. This forgotten African kingdom would change world history forever. The legendary wealth. The soil of this ancient land was rich with incense. The winds carried the scent of myrrh across the Red Sea. Its people lived in prosperity, fearing no famine or drought. Tonight I will reveal the true story of the Land of Punt, the ancient African civilization that many historians believe is the origin of modern Somalia, the forgotten kingdom of our ancestors. Ancient Horn of Africa. Picture the Horn of Africa thousands of years ago, long before colonization or modern cities. Just endless sky, the Red Sea and red earth stretching to the horizon. The Red Sea shimmered like molten copper in the sunlight. Along these ancient coasts, what we now call Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, and northern Kenya, stood thriving villages connected by ancient trade routes that linked Africa to the world. Ancient maritime trade. Ancient Puntite merchants sailed massive wooden ships, their sails catching the monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean, carrying the most valuable treasures of the ancient world: frankincense, myrrh, gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals. Meanwhile, ancient Egypt was rising to power, constructing the pyramids and elaborate tombs for their pharaohs. But Egypt lacked the sacred incense, precious myrrh, and exotic wildlife they needed for their religious ceremonies. So the pharaohs looked east across the Red Sea and declared, "There is a legendary land beyond the waters, an ancient kingdom called Punt, the people of ancient Punt." Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics and temple carvings reveal fascinating details about the people of Punt. Temple walls show people with dark brown skin, slim facial features, intricately braided hair, and clothing remarkably similar to coastal Somali traditional dress. The men carried spears for protection. Women adorned themselves with gold jewelry. Their houses stood on stilts to protect from flooding. Long-horned cattle and goats grazed the grasslands nearby, a scene identical to traditional Somali life. Unbroken cultural connection. From the ancient port of Zayla to Hobyo to Mogadishu, that traditional way of life endures to this day. Fishermen still read the patterns of the sea. Nomads still follow the rains across the Horn of Africa. Homes are still scented with burning myrrh during cultural ceremonies. The historical connection remains unbroken. Modern historians and archaeologists studying the plants, animals, wind patterns, and linguistic evidence keep pointing back to the Horn of Africa, to our side of the Red Sea. Queen Hatshepsut's historic expedition. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt launched expeditions to Punt. The most famous is documented on Queen Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahri, one of ancient Egypt's greatest archaeological sites. The temple walls depict her historic expedition in stunning detail. Massive Egyptian ships loaded with sailors crossing the dangerous Red Sea for weeks until finally land appeared on the horizon. Houses on stilts, people watching from the shore. The ancient Egyptians had reached the legendary Land of Punt, the great trade exchange. On Queen Hatshepsut's temple walls, we see the rulers of Punt greeting the Egyptian envoys with ceremony and respect. The ancient trade exchange was extraordinary. Living myrrh trees, roots carefully wrapped for transplanting to Egypt. Massive bundles of frankincense, gold bars, ivory tusks, precious ebony wood, even living giraffes, animals the Egyptians had never seen before. Ancient Egypt carved this historic moment in stone for eternity. For reaching Punt wasn't just trade, it was considered divine intervention by the gods. Sacred trade goods. Imagine walking through an ancient Puntite marketplace, the air thick with the sacred smoke of frankincense and myrrh tree sap collected from the unique trees of the Horn of Africa. This was the spiritual currency of the ancient world. Only the climate and soil of this region could grow these sacred plants. giving Punt complete monopoly control over the most valuable religious trade in human history. The ancient trade network gold panned from riverbeds, ivory from elephants, leopard skins, ostrich feathers, rare exotic animals from the African interior. In return, Punt received Egyptian glass beads, fine linen, bronze tools, and weapons. But this ancient civilization traded more than just goods. They exchanged diplomatic relationships, religious ideas, and advanced knowledge. Punt became a nerve center connecting ancient Africa and Arabia in the ancient world's greatest trade network. Evidence points to Somalia. So was the Land of Punt actually ancient Somalia? The archaeological evidence is compelling. Ancient Egyptian records describe sailing down the Red Sea, hugging the African coast, geographical evidence pointing directly to the Horn of Africa. The trade goods of Punt, frankincense, myrrh, ivory, perfectly matched traditional Somali exports for thousands of years. The physical features of Punt's people, depicted in Egyptian art, match Somali features. The geography described in ancient texts fits the Somali coastline. Scholarly consensus. Most historians and archaeologists studying ancient African civilizations place Punt in modern-day Somalia and neighboring regions of the Horn of Africa. Some scholars also include parts of Eritrea, eastern Sudan, or even southern Yemen in the ancient territory, but the historical and cultural center remains here on the Somali coast. Living legacy. Look at our traditional incense ceremonies today, our ancient seafaring culture, our historic trade connections with Arabia and India. Whether you call it the ancient Land of Punt or the Somali coast, the historical essence remains unchanged. We were never a small or isolated civilization. When people claim Africa had no ancient civilizations, no complex societies, no historical importance, they forget about Punt. They ignore thousands of years of documented African history. Cultural memory lives on the ancient ships have rotted away. The incense has burned, the gold has melted and been reformed countless times. But blood memory and cultural traditions remain alive. Every Somali home that burns unsi, traditional incense, every trader crossing the seas, every gaze toward the horizon carries the spirit of ancient Punt within it. Punt represents more than ancient history. It's a cultural attitude passed down through generations. We have always been here. We have always mattered. Reclaiming our narrative today, the modern world speaks of Somalia only through the lens of recent conflicts and struggles. International media has forgotten our rich history. They forget that our land once supplied the sacred incense that perfumed the temples of pharaohs and kings across the ancient world. When you walk the streets of Mogadishu, Hargeisa, Berbera, or Bosaso, feel the layers of ancient history beneath your feet. Ancient trade roads, historic harbors that connected continents, civilizations that rose and fell. Respect for our present begins with remembering our past. Our historical identity. When someone asks you, what is Somalia's history? You can now answer with pride. Somalia is the land once known as Punt, the ancient African civilization that traded with pharaohs and supplied the sacred incense that perfumed their palaces and temples. We didn't just arrive in history recently. We are descendants of one of humanity's oldest documented civilizations. We remember. We endure. Ancient wisdom. Our ancestors understood a profound truth. Land is not merely soil beneath your feet. Land is blood memory. Land is historical identity. Land is cultural duty to future generations. The ancients knew this truth, so must we. Dul la'ani, dakan la'an bay kinta. Without land, there is no culture. Without history, there is no identity. Stand proud. The Land of Punt reminds us that our homeland has always been connected to the heart of world civilization. Never isolated, never insignificant. Ancient trade routes, diplomatic relations with Egypt, cultural exchanges that shaped human history. Hold your head high. You come from a coast that once carried the scent of the gods across the ancient world. Next episode preview. This was the story of the Land of Punt, where African civilization began. Next episode, the Sultan of Mogadishu, the medieval African city that ruled the Indian Ocean trade. Until then, remember who you are. Remember where you come from. Remember the ancient blood that flows through your veins. Subscribe for more untold African history. Like this video if you learned something new. Share this forgotten history with someone who needs to hear it. The sacred economy of incense. To understand why Egypt prized punt so highly, we must understand the sacred economy of frankincense and myrrh. These weren't mere luxuries, they were the spiritual currency of the ancient world. Frankincense comes from boswellia trees, particularly Boswellia sacra and Boswellia freriana, which grow in the unique climate of the Horn of Africa. Harvesters make careful incisions in the bark, and the tree bleeds, an aromatic resin that hardens into translucent golden tears. The best frankincense, called antiu in Egyptian texts, came exclusively from Punt. Myrrh from Commiphora trees was even more precious. Used both as incense and in medicinal ointments, myrrh was essential for embalming, the very process that allowed pharaohs to achieve immortality through mummification. The Egyptians developed elaborate incense rituals. Frankincense burned in temples at sunrise, myrrh at noon, and a sacred blend called kaiphai, containing raisins, wine, frankincense, myrrh, and other aromatics, at sunset. This sacred smoke was believed to carry prayers directly to the gods. Without Punt's incense, the spiritual connection between Egypt and its deities would have been severed. Here's the crucial economic fact. Only the climate and soil of the Horn of Africa and southern Arabia could grow these sacred plants in commercial quantities. Punt held a complete monopoly over the most valuable religious commodity in the ancient world. This monopoly made the kingdom fabulously wealthy and gave it tremendous diplomatic power. A network of ancient cities. Recent archaeological surveys in northern Somalia have identified over 70 ruined ancient towns. 4 major urban centers date back approximately 2,000 years. The ancient cities of Salwain, known to the Greeks as Mundus, Damo, the Cape of Spices, and 2 settlements at Zafun, ancient Opone. The city name Opone is particularly significant. Ancient Egyptian texts refer to a place called Puan, or Puen, as part of Punt. The similarity is striking, and it matches perfectly with the ancient Somali name for their region, Bun or Bunni. This linguistic connection, preserved across 4,000 years, provides powerful evidence linking Somalia to ancient Punt. These weren't primitive villages. Archaeological research reveals a culture of literacy and sophisticated urban planning. Hundreds of ancient inscriptions have been discovered, written in scripts that remain undeciphered to this day. These writings, along with the architectural remains, stone walls, courtyards, and complex structures, demonstrate that Punt was a civilization with its own writing systems, advanced engineering capabilities, and organized government. The port cities of ancient Somalia, Zayla, Malawi, Berbera, became the main trading hubs connecting Egyptian merchants with goods from deep in the African interior. These weren't just transshipment points. They were cosmopolitan centers where cultures mixed, ideas exchanged, and fortunes were made. The wider trade network Punt wasn't just trading with Egypt. Ancient texts and archaeological evidence show that Puntite merchants maintained trading relationships across the ancient world. Phoenician traders from the Lebanese coast, Babylonians from Mesopotamia, Indian merchants crossing the Indian Ocean, and eventually Greek and Roman traders all sought Punt's goods. The incense trade route became one of the most important commercial networks in human history. Caravans of camels, domesticated around 1500 to 1200 BCE, carried frankincense and myrrh across the deserts of Arabia to markets in Babylon, Damascus, and eventually to Mediterranean ports. These routes, later formalized as the Incense Road, built cities, funded kingdoms, and connected the ancient world's great civilizations. Somali merchants were savvy businessmen. Greek and Roman sources report that they sometimes inflated prices by claiming that cinnamon came from Somalia, when it actually originated in Ceylon and the Spice Islands of Southeast Asia. This deliberate misdirection protected their trading secrets and profit margins, an early form of trade protection that lasted for centuries. In return for their exports, Punt received finished goods from across the known world. Egyptian glass and linen, bronze tools and weapons, Greek pottery, Indian spices, and Arabian horses. Gold coins and trade goods found in Somali archaeological sites prove these connections extended well into the classical period. The spiritual and diplomatic bond. The relationship between Egypt and Punt went far beyond simple commerce. Ancient Egyptian religious texts describe Punt as the homeland of the gods, specifically of Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, and motherhood, and Bez, the dwarf god who protected childbirth. Egyptian inscriptions even claim that some pharaohs had divine mothers from Punt. The 18th dynasty pharaohs, including Hatshepsut herself, considered Punt the origin of Egyptian culture. One inscription states that the gods themselves dwelt in Punt, and Egyptian souls were said to travel there after death. This spiritual connection elevated Punt far above Egypt's other trading partners. Hatshepsut's temple texts describe the god Amun-Ra commanding her to send an expedition to Punt. "It is the sacred region of God's land. It is my place of delight. I have made it for myself." When Hatshepsut returned from Punt, she didn't present the goods as tribute from a conquered territory. Instead, she offered them to Amun-Ra as gifts from one sacred land to another, Punt and Egypt as equals under the gods. Diplomatic relations were so close that children of Puntite chiefs were raised at the Egyptian royal court alongside the sons and daughters of pharaohs. These weren't hostages, as was common practice with conquered peoples. They were honored guests, educated in Egyptian customs and language, who would return home as cultural ambassadors. Why Punt disappeared from history? After the reign of Ramesses III in the early 20th dynasty, around 1100 BCE, references to Punt in Egyptian records become sparse and then cease entirely. What happened to this great kingdom? The answer isn't conquest or catastrophe, it's political and economic change. By the end of Egypt's New Kingdom period, the Egyptian state itself was in decline. Civil wars, foreign invasions, and economic troubles meant fewer resources for expensive long-distance trading expeditions. The dangerous journey to Punt, once justified by religious necessity and royal prestige, became less feasible. At the same time, trade routes were shifting. Arabia's kingdoms developed overland caravan routes that could move frankincense and myrrh without the dangers of Red Sea navigation. Alternative sources of luxury goods opened up in East Africa and India. Punt's monopoly weakened as the trade network diversified. But Punt didn't vanish, it transformed. The Somali port cities continued to thrive, now trading with new partners: Greeks, Romans, Indians, and later Arabs. Medieval Arab geographers knew the Somali coast as Al-Barbara, and it remained a crucial link in the Indian Ocean trade network through the Islamic Golden Age. By the post-New Kingdom period, Punt had become mythologized in Egyptian memory. Love poems spoke wistfully of traveling to Punt as an impossible romantic fantasy. The actual kingdom had receded into legend, an unreal and fabulous land of myths, as Egyptologist Joyce Tildesley describes it. Yet this mythic status reveals how deeply Punt had impressed itself on Egyptian consciousness. The living legacy in modern Somalia. Walk through any Somali home today during a cultural ceremony, and you'll smell unsi burning. Traditional incense, often frankincense or myrrh, used to purify spaces and honor guests. This practice stretches back unbroken to ancient Punt. The Somali language itself preserves ancient connections. Comparative linguistic studies show remarkable similarities between ancient Egyptian and Somali vocabulary. The Egyptian word hez means song sung with a musical instrument. In Somali, hez means exactly the same thing. Aar means lion in both languages. These aren't coincidental, they're echoes of millennia of cultural exchange. Traditional Somali ceremonial dress, particularly the white flowing garments worn at important gatherings, bears striking resemblance to the clothing depicted in ancient Egyptian tomb paintings. The tradition of raised houses in coastal areas, while less common now, persisted into the modern era. Architectural continuity spanning 4,000 years. Even genetic research reveals the connection. DNA studies show that Somali populations carry genetic markers linking them to ancient populations that inhabited the Nile Valley and Horn of Africa thousands of years ago. language family, which includes both ancient Egyptian and Somali, spread across this region through ancestral populations scientists now call Ethio-Somali, believed to have diverged from other populations at least 23,000 years ago.